You know, one company who handled this whole situation so much better than Google did is Nintendo. They had a really difficult time years ago when sales tanked and profits shrunk. The president, Satoru Iwata, decided to cut his own salary by 50%, while others on the leadership team reduced their salaries by 20%. That's a powerful example of servant leadership.
When people say leadership matters, it indeed truly does matter. And so that clip earlier showed us that there are different types of leaders out there. There are some who actually care about those who they are leading, and some who care only about themselves. And so the question is today, do we think that our current leadership in the government in St. Kitts, do they really truly care about the people, or do they care about themselves? That's a question that I would like to propose under a particular framing. But before we do so, let's just like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you know when Talk SKN drops another video. My other channel is Learn SKN, so you can check it out if you have people doing CXC. But yeah, so this was kind of triggered by a post I saw recently where someone named Kelvin Daly proposed a question. When ministers of government become millionaires on a public salary, what explanation can there be for it? Why is this behavior acceptable? So I saw this, and then recently I saw something about some Stephen A. Smith, who speaks on politics now, whatever, and he was asking about how come Obama worth almost 100 million, or how come Clinton worth almost 100 million. That's neither here nor there, but we're back here in St. Kitts. So that's when I was thinking about our government and the actions they took in 2024, around that time. We had to increase their salaries. After the back of COVID, hard times in St. Kitts, and they chose to increase their salaries about maybe 2 years into, well, a year and a half into their administration. And so some comments were here. This behavior is acceptable because the people allow it. True. It's crazy, but we turn the blind eye and do not hold them accountable, right? There is an Integrity in Office Act, but it's all about no bite. Some people prefer to be poor and desperate, whilst their party and people in power, they could be dying from hunger, but defend their party for stealing and throwing away food to keep them alive, right? And so this is just a true statement, because you would realize that even in America, a lot of poor whites are MAGA, and they are saying $1 billion you're going to save them, $1 billion you're going to save them. Crazy thinking, right? So that is when I jump back and I say, okay, these people see hard time coming, during his administration, hard time coming. And they said, okay, let's increase our salaries by 30% and more. And so you wonder, well, why? Why would they do that? Because the reality is they had just gotten in power and they didn't really accomplish anything by 2023, 2024. Nothing was really done. You look at this this picture right here. You're saying 3 completed major projects versus 12, right? Team Unity in the first 4 years, 12. Joe administration since 2022, just 3. But yet, they would have gotten a salary increase before, just shortly after they entered. Like, did they earn that? How is it that you feel it's okay to just increase your salary when you just got into office, haven't accomplished anything else? And what excuse did they give? What excuse did they give? Here we have the AG, right? Let me read what he said here, because you can't make this stuff up. You cannot make this stuff up. The aim of this resolution, let me just zoom in so everybody can see this thing here. The aim of this resolution, according to Attorney General Gart Wilkin, is to mitigate corrupt practices, as many of the parliamentarians had thriving businesses before they entered the practice. When it does come on stream next month, it will assist in alleviating the need for them to seek additional funds through unfavorable means to sustain their livelihoods because parliamentarians have not seen an increase in more than 19 years. Now, how did this just go under wraps? How did it just fly all people's head? Like, how is it that there was not a strike or a march? How is it there was nothing? Like, this is what you're telling me? That if you don't increase the salary of the members of parliament, they are going to seek funds in unfavorable means? So you're saying that the Labour administration is filled with persons who cannot be trusted. That these people are going to be so broke that they might take bribes and this. Like, what is this paragraph all about? How did this just slide? It never sat well with me. But persons seem like, all the sycophants and supporters were like, yeah, so what? So what? Yeah, they deserve it. Deserve what? Look here. This is so crazy, right? For him to actually verbalize it is madness. That you're going to increase the salaries. And let me just ask a question here. Is this true? Is it that these people were living so high before? Most of them were living so high before they got into office? I remember one of them saying that thank God for the office they were able to pay their student loan off. Which means, I don't think they were living that high before. Right? That's just one example. And if you chose to become a civil servant or a service servant for the people, the salary you were getting was already way above the average man. Way above the average. We're going to dig into that right now. Way above the average man. So it's crazy to think that your impetus to increase your salary is that you don't want the parliamentarians them doing any nefarious things. Taking the bribe and the money and that is crazy work for a country to just swallow that just like that. Crazy. Right? So let's look at the numbers then, because apparently they would have been paupers if they maintained the salary that they were getting. Now let's look at the Prime Minister's salary. God, that's the head honcho, that's the leader. Look at his salary. And so before this proposed bill, how much money the Prime Minister was getting? How much we think he was getting? Like base salary. Let's look at his base salary before this madness, right? So in 2022. That's right, people. You can get the salary scale. It's public knowledge. So, go and look at it. So 2022, January, when they got into office, in later that year, the Prime Minister would have been making a whopping $137,280. That was the Prime Minister's salary, base salary. Now that doesn't include all of the allowances and whatnot that and the perks that come with the job. That don't include that. His base salary was $137,280. Now, who among us, how many of us in St. Kitts working for that kind of money? Who, of course, they are the CEOs of big banks and whatnot. Sure, fine, they're making sick profit. That's a whole different ball game. But within the government itself, that's the near top. Only the Governor General is getting more. And you're telling me that in 2022, 2023, 2024, the Prime Minister of St. Kitts could not survive on a salary of $100,000 plus all the other perks and whatnot. Couldn't. Because apparently they had to go and increase it. In 2022, if you're looking at the salary scales, even the highest scale in the civil service, $106,000. The Prime Minister is still beating them annually, still making a significant amount of money over the highest civil servant on the scale. And so to think that you could not survive on 100, but then again, I got to come back and say that's not the rationale. The rationale was never survival of the parliamentarians. The rationale was that the salary was too small because, and that would cause them to go and seek monies elsewhere. How we accepted this again, I honestly don't know. Because you are still miles ahead of the average person in the civil service. If you're looking at somebody, let's say top of your scale for a degree professional, $66,000. Prime Minister, $137,000. Still a significant difference. Because if you pull out the calculator, let's look at some calculation here, right? So we're saying that Prime Minister again 137, 2080 minus, I'm going to use the average degreed civil servant at the time, 2022. So they are getting 66,300. The difference is still $70,000. $70,000. That's the difference still. And they were making it do. But I guess the Prime Minister just couldn't make that do at all. Now, what is it today? All right, the salary for the Prime Minister now is what? $180,000. $180,000. So between 2022 and 2026, the Prime Minister's salary jumped by 31%. Right? Let me just do a quick math so you can understand, right? So it's 137 to 80. Now it's 180,000. You calculate that. That is 31% increase in salary. 31%. Now, if you take the same time period and look at the average civil servant, so what's the difference there in percentage, right? What the increase is. All right, so we would have jumped from, what was 66,300, and it ended at 78. All right, so to calculate that, 18%. So the average degreed civil servant who is at top of their scale, their percentage change from 2022 to 2026 was 18%. Whereas the Prime Minister, 31%. Look at that disparity right there, right? 31 versus 18. Back to the average degreed civil servant. Somebody who's at the top of the scale, went to school, got your degree, you're on top of your scale. And so in 2026, when you factor in the various increases that I'm going to mention later on, you see that in 2026, someone at the top of the scale is working at K38 is working for $78,768,000 a year. And as I said before, the Prime Minister is now working for $180,000. Now, remember the math I did earlier when I said that the difference in 2022 was just 70,000. Just 70,000. That is saying just, but it's a lot, right? But the difference is $70,980. Now, take that same thing here, 2026 now, today. Prime Minister working for $180,000. Minus that from the average civil servant who has a degree at K38 right here. They are now working for $78,768. So now minus the $78,768. So you realize now that the gap has widened. The gap has widened because in 2022 it was only 70,000, and now in 2026, why the Prime Minister said, "Watch here, I too close to me." Because actually, there's some arguments I got. I got some of these from other people who support Labour. They're saying, "Bah, no, imagine you're the Prime Minister and you got a man who's the head of the civil servant, wherever, got a degree, and they're making almost as much as me. That can't work." That was an argument. Don't know if that was part of it. Then again, that wasn't it. The argument was, according to the AG, you don't want them to get additional funds from unfavorable means. So let me I keep trying to rationalize it, but I'll come back to your words as to why they gave them a salary increase. And people out there defending these kind of things, defending it, not realizing that the income gap, the disparity is just widening. Just widening. So let me see what about the persons on the lower rung of the ladder? Let's see what happening there. Because in 2022, right, the man making, I'm going to start with kitten, because I think that's the minimum wage at the time. Kitten. So I'm making at $20,000, right? So you're making $20,640, right? I'm making, back then, the prime minister making $137, $280. A man on average for the minimum wage would have been making maybe $20,000 a year, you know? A year. What's the difference? $116,000. So let's fast forward to 2026 now. CM Kitten, right? Now you're making 24, because I got up to $500 a week minimum wage. So you're making 24 now. So let's see now. 180 minus 24,516 equal cheese and bread. So you want to talk about widening income gap? Do you see the difference there? Like, this gap is just widening. And so when I think that these people are doing things for the best interests of us, remember, in 2026, that already includes the 8% increase plus the 10% that Unity gave them prior. We're going to look into that. And so you realize that still between 2022 and 2026, that gap has widened significantly. Let's look at the heads, the highest civil servant. The highest civil servant in 2026. The difference now, let's see. 180 minus 126. Bear with me, people. Minus 126, 816 equal $53,000. That's it. $53,000 difference. Back then, it was 137, 280 minus 1,600. Let's see, 1,607, 740. It was 30. It was 30. And so these people are putting such a big gap between the average man and those at the top. But don't for a moment think that they gave us 18%. Not us, but well, I worked at civil servant back then. But don't think for a moment it was 18%. Because when they got in office, they increased the salary by 8%, right? But prior to that, the Unity government, Tim and Pam, they actually increased the civil servants' salary by 10%, retroactive. You get back pay and everything by 10% in 2022. By 10%. But you see them talking about when they increase ours too? Sure, Labour gonna tell you, oh, it was in the works. It was in the works. Did it happen? No. And so you'll find that this government love to say government is continuous only for certain things, like salary increases. Government is continuous for that. But other things, oh no, we're doing our own thing. So what Tim said was that at a time when external forces such as supply and demand chain disruptions and the war in Ukraine are driving up cost of living, the government's 10% increase on salaries and a wage of civil servants, pensioners, and workers up the skill training step is going to get an increase in salary. The 10% announced by Tim on Labor Day, May, that's last in 2022, is retroactive, meaning you get money from back then. So May, you get paid from January, February, March up to May, plus going forward the 10%. Right? Sort us out good as civil servants, right? So it's everybody get the little top up right there. Yeah, step workers, everybody got a little top up. And so sometimes you hear this government boasting about the 8%. One thing that annoys me about politics in St. Kitts is that, well, I see it more pronounced now when they pretend that there was never a 7 years between Dougie and Drew. And so they wouldn't even go back and say, but Unity gave 10% in 2022. We gave 8% in 2021, 3, 4. And that is why you see the difference between the 18%. So there's increase by 31, the Prime Minister by 31% between 2022 and now. And the average civil servant who is degreed would have increased by 18%. 10 was given under Unity and 8 under the current administration. So you realize that the rationale for giving the parliamentarians a salary increase ain't got nothing to do with hardship that they are going through, has nothing to do with the state of the economy, has nothing to do with any of those things. Two simple reasons. You don't want them to get more money from corrupt practices. And well, man, they ain't getting only 19 years, so why not just give them? We ain't getting only 19 years, why not just give them? Now, hear me out. I am in agreement that they should have received an increase. But timing is crucial. Timing and optics, they are very important. When it comes to timing, why are you getting a salary increase 2 years into your administration when you did nothing? You didn't prove yourself to the people. You ain't worked for it, but yet here you are getting an increase just like that. Because corruption and 19 years. Optics. Things rough with the economy. Things rough. Things have been rough since a while now. People struggling, and here you are increasing his salary. Now, the video I showed you at the beginning, the president of Nintendo, understand things rough. So what I'm going to do? I'm going to cut my salary so that others can benefit. But here it is that this government chose to increase their salary when deficit spending happening, inflation, war, and whatnot going on, and they say, let me increase my salary. The wage bill balloon. And yet here we are increasing our salary. So you want so obviously it has nothing to do with performance. It has everything to do with the year long, the belly young, and they might be tempted. Not my words, that's what God talking about here. God saying that through unfavorable means. Unfavorable cannot be good. So it must mean that these people who are in office now are the type that, because of the salary size, they might end up going and doing something unfavorable to get more money. This is crazy. This is crazy thinking. And so what we have to understand is that, let's look at the salary scale again, because people realize that, let me dig into the 8% first. So they say that they're going to increase the salary by 8%. So Honorable Terence Drew said that civil servants and pensioners will receive a general salary increase of 8%. And they tout that as a major accomplishment. Sure, more money. Okay, cool. 10 versus 8, big difference, eh? But let's break down the 8% for those who came into the civil servant after 2012. So understand that before 2012, anybody who was part of the civil service, they ain't had to give anything to the pension. Pension was there for you when you reach the age or whatever, put in the time, you get your pension. But under this administration, anybody who were employed after 2012, they must contribute 3% of their salary to their pension, right here. Right? You have to contribute 3%. And if you were employed prior to, but you say, okay, let me opt in to work to 67%, you have to contribute 3%. So one time, that 8% increase you got has been eroded by the fact that you can contribute 3%. So then we're down to what? 5%. We're down to 5%. So the total 8, we're down to 5%. Not to mention inflation. Now, inflation has been around 2%-ish. So the 5 minus a 2, what we're left back with now? A little 3%. So your real salary increase is maybe a little about 3%. Let's look at this thing here now. Wallet boost, right? Because they don't realize that the wallet boost reveals so much things about St. Kitts, right? And not for the best. The budget boost told us that over about 23,000 people in St. Kitts working for $60,000 or less. Because understand that the wallet boost was for persons 5,000 and below. So 5,000 a month times 12, you're 60, right? Remember that's gross, eh? We're talking gross. We're not even talking about net. We're talking about gross, right? Gross. And so we're saying that they're making $60,000 a year. Prime Minister making $180,000 a year. You're still clearing the average degreed worker. I wouldn't even say that because some people ain't appointed. They're not appointed, and so they might not be getting the $5,000, $6,000. Right? So if you look at the 2026, let's see who is at that stage right now. The 5,000 bar. That would be someone who is working for, let's see here now. Let's see, which scale is that? Okay, let's say K31. K31. So then you have persons who are degreed, so they'll be getting starting at 5,000. So they ain't qualified for budget booster, but these are persons who got to pay back the student loan. I mean, they make a mortgage, they make a whatever. So you're rough in the middle. You're rough in the middle, right? So even at K31, somebody making $5,000 a month, which is about $6,000 a year, you're still beating them. Parents are still beating them, but yet they can't survive on that. Even if I take out the 180 and go back to 137, you're still beating the people who making $60,000 a year still. So you understand that these people did not increase their salaries because life hard with them. Because you could get by on $137,000 a year. They didn't increase because life hard with them. They increased again, for what reason, according to AG? Because we don't want them to get money in an unfavorable way. That's greed. That is greed. That is the height of greed. That you are telling me that the 100K can't do for you. So you have to look elsewhere to get money while you're a parliamentarian. And so many other civil servants who try to look money elsewhere. Some of them fight down, they say you can't moonlight, you can't do this, you can't do that. Hey, I gotta give hand to teachers, eh? Education. Let me tell you something. Education, when it comes to salary, they are getting shafted. Why I say that? Because for a teacher to reach K40, they must have their degree, and they also must be trained. So you have to spend 2 years in teachers education, teachers ed, 2 years, and then you need to spend 3 to 4 years getting a degree for you to qualify for K40. That's if you're appointed, eh? But then there's so many others in other parts of government getting K40 simply with a degree. I remember working in agriculture, and there was a post for a marketing manager. The qualifications were a marketing degree, and you're at K40, right? You're at K40, one time so, right? K40. So, right? So you have marketing manager, right, for agriculture. You start getting the tree to K40, the top is K40. Nothing gonna stop you. You ain't got to go and specialize in nothing. You got a degree, and one time you gone up to K40 once you got a degree, right? Teachers here, you got to get your teacher's ed certificate, and you also had to go and get your degree to reach K40. So yeah, that need revamping. Seriously, that need revamping. But I digress. So back to these persons who, making all this money and saying that is because they don't want to be able to get it through certain means. So the ultimate point here is that, as I wrap up, do you think that the government, the prime minister, do you think 137,000 a year was enough? Or do you think they needed to go up to 180? That's a question. Because as far as I'm concerned, even at 137,000 a year, you are still significantly above the average worker in the government who has a degree. You're still significantly above them. And look at how many I've been in debates about this whole thing. And nobody can justify it. Nobody can justify it. They try their best, the sycophants, the supporters, they try their best, but nobody can justify the government of St. Kitts, the parliamentarians, increasing their salary during a time when things were rough, when they're already making $100,000 a year, and the average man making far less. Nobody could have said, yeah, it's supposed to. Especially for the mere fact that it was so quick after they got into office. They didn't prove themselves, nothing. So look at this right here now. Now, Shani and Pam, we got hold to this. Because if you win, the words are there. Quick wins to bring ease to the cost of living. This is Pam, right? I support this 100%. Accountability from cabinet, starting with reversing the Minister of Finance's 35% pay increase, while citizens' assistance was cut in half. They put it out there. Somebody was asking them, do you all promise to reduce, to reverse it? See it there in black and yellow. The PAM party is saying things are rough. And so if we get into office, we can reverse the nonsense. Because again, I say, the prime minister can live on a salary of $137,000. They can. And when things are looking up, sure, increase the salary. When persons are in a better position, sure, increase the salary. When you put in the work, sure, we could say it, we could say, okay, yeah, they're worth it, increase the salary. But you can't tell me you increase the salary and you haven't done the work. In what world does that make sense? And so Pam is saying, when we're going in, we're going to reverse this foolishness. Because believe you me, that is one of the reasons why there's such a strain on the wage bill in St. Kitts. Because if you have to now pay the Prime Minister an additional $40-something thousand, when you understand that could have been what? The annual salary for 2 additional workers there. That's just the difference, eh? Those getting 24 and 24. Right? Because that money could have gone elsewhere. For all of them. There's a lot of money added to the wage bill, especially when government resources, the government monies are going down, the accounts is going down. The deficit spending is happening, but yet these people increase the salary. Madness, craziness. So Pam, I hold you to that when you get into office, you are going to reverse that. You said it, And don't be like Labour, who had all kind of talk, and they gone in and pull assistance from people. Because that's a reality. They did take from people. Alright, so let me know what you guys think about this whole thing. I know we let it slide already. We're gonna let it slide again? I hope not. Like and subscribe and hit the bell.